Hello, good evening everyone, and welcome to One World, One Blood Bowl number 40, how to win the 2027 World Cup of Blood Bowl. So that's what we're going to discuss tonight, and we're going to solve that, so we're going to tell you how to get that done. So hopefully there's only about 4 or 6 people listening, and obviously they'll form a team and they will win the World Cup in 2027. With me to pour over our learnings from the World Cup in 23 and obviously decide how we're going to win the World Cup in 27. I have 3 lovely people, a couple you've met before. We have Mike Davies, also known as San0638. We have Joemanji, the beautiful one, the pretty boy of all the President's Men. Also of Team England fame. Now, I called you the brains behind the outfit, and that was disputed by some of your teammates, who describe you very much as the token pretty boy that they take to great wins.
It's a cross I have to bear. But yeah.
There we are. If you've got the looks, I mean, personally, I find Gangster to be just all man, but
Oh God, yeah.
just in his
Yeah, your
shorts,
crush is
his
well
shorts and his
documented.
smile, it does it to me. But brand new to One World, One Blood Bowl. Good evening, Dan. Welcome to Wulfyn. Hello.
That's the introduction.
That's the bit where you say hello.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan.
That was
Long-time
seamless.
Blood Bowler, first-time podcaster.
Is that true? Have you never been on a podcast before?
Never been on a podcast before.
There's about 700 of them now. I plan to do an episode where we get some other podcasters on and talk
I know
about
I've been
why they're doing
diligently
it.
avoiding them, but how can you resist the PurpleChest?
Well, I mean, so few do. I'm incredibly flattered that most people seem to say yes when I ask them. There's 1 or 2 holdouts that I am trying to talk into it, but obviously this isn't everyone's cup of tea. Now, I've described you in the adverts I draw for this as the master of the tackle zone, a name I've known about almost as long as I've been in Blood Bowl, but a name that has just sort of been there. What is the tackle zone? What are you?
So it used to be a website dedicated towards some training articles and various exploits that we undertook around Europe on our tournament endeavors. And we also used to do a bit of streaming. So we streamed from the Euro Bowl 2018 in Wales. And then I think the NAF Championship the following year, which both really enjoyable experiences. I actually enjoyed that Euro Bowl streaming. I think more than I would have enjoyed playing in the European. It was great to be part of it, and Hawker and the team did a really good job making me feel welcome and running that event, and yeah, making sure everything ran smoothly. So we really enjoyed that, but that's kind of all gone now. And instead, the tackle zone has re-emerged around just post World Cup as a tournament team focused on trying to get better at winning tournaments or starting to win tournaments, and in particular trying to refocus and get a lot of guys back towards playing a lot more of the competitive tournaments, especially in Europe. I think one of the themes that we're going to talk about today is how much of an advantage it is when you go to someone like the World Cup if you've played a lot of top tournaments and played a lot of these top European players. And so the
Well, I mean, those might be 2 separate things to me as well, which is a subject I want to come to. Playing a lot of tournaments and playing top European players do seem to be not necessarily the same thing, and a recent Team England document would seem to back that up. You've been in Blood Bowl a long time, you were bragging before the show. Despite my aged looks, you claim to have been on Fumble longer than I have. How can this be true?
Well, I mean, being a true veteran of the game, a true maestro, has been on Fumble since at least July 2003. None of these October newbies. I started playing again in university. I'd obviously played as a kid, sort of 2nd, 3rd edition, Astro Granite, foam pitches, and the like. And like many people, it was all right until 3rd edition came along and the turnover rule came in, and that's when it kind of really sparked everyone's interest. Obviously, much harder to do at university with friends around the country. So Fumble was something that we discovered and used quite a lot. But yeah, mainly used just to sort of play each other. And I pretty much stopped playing Blood Bowl at that point, just as everything really kicked off. And I didn't really come back into it until 2014 when a friend of mine said, do you want to go to a Blood Bowl tournament? And I said, don't be stupid. There's no such thing as a Blood Bowl tournament. And then obviously met all these guys, and it's been history since.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Blood Bowl was so incredibly popular in the 1st and 2nd editions before it was any good at all. back when it was an absolutely terrible game. But there was still that kernel within it that just seemed to grab everybody's attention and get everybody wanting it to be a good game, which one day eventually it might be. Who knows? So you've been in Blood Bowl a long, long time, but that spark is still there. You still have that youthful beat in your heart.
Yeah, I think it's been a bit difficult, obviously, for quite a few people over the last few years. And I wasn't sure for a couple of years ago. I think maybe I was quite happy just to play UKTC or something like that. Lots of other things going on, new jobs, kids, etc. Just normal life, as I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate. And but I kind of it was always there. It's always been an enjoyment, and I've got so many great memories as well. Guys like Joe making me feel so welcome. After that first NAF Championship, I joined the ECBBL in London. Met guys like him, Gegster, Lycos, and many many others.
But we're never actually invited onto their little closed-knit, highly competitive unit, were you?
If they take two teams,
Okay.
I occasionally squeak in. So there's been a Tillian Cup, there's been a Bilbao Cup. So yeah, I've traveled with these guys quite a lot. Um, what was the one in south of France? Rug Bowl. Yeah, see, third reserve for Rug Bowl, just about squeaked into that one. Um, and then yeah, basically the World Cup came along, and I'm like, you know what, I just love this. How can you not really fall in love with the game after that?
Yeah, exactly. And your team, the Tackle Zone, went to the World Cup, and I, saw you a fair amount bouncing around at the higher ends of the tables. How did it
Yeah,
go? How was your World Cup?
we definitely crossed over. For me, I think it was as well as I could expect. I was very rusty, not played for a long time, playing a very different team to one I would normally play. I usually go for control teams like Lizards and Dark Elves. Decided to get on the Underworld bandwagon with a fouling roster. I thought foolishly, well, this will either work or it won't. So it won't require a lot of brain power. So it probably will ease me back in. Every turn was a puzzle. 16 turns for 9 games just wrecked me. But yeah, we had quite a few rusty players, like very good players, but rusty players. So our results were very up and down. Obviously, we had Andy Davis on the team as well.
So you
So
can
yeah,
confirm the rumours that he was charging €10 for a selfie?
well, he wanted to charge 8, but we said you can definitely get 10 out of it. In fact, I think I only saw him about 3 times during the whole weekend. There's just too many fans in the way. No, I'm kidding. And it was really good. I've known Andy for a while. We've had lots of good chats, but there's nothing quite like being in that kind of tournament environment and spending a bit more time with someone to really get to know them. So yeah, that was one of the highlights.
And looking down the list of, as we did, of the teams going to the World Cup, outside of all the President's Men and their proven quality, the Tackle Zone was another one that leapt out as me. Is there's a lot of well-known, decent, solid players on this team. There was one or two I didn't know as well. But
Well, this is
people
the
like
failing of Elo, right? You keep it forever. So again, we had lots of players who Wilsif was a prime example. He's played for England before. He's won a Euro Bowl. He's not played for years. So he did really well, but very rusty, not as well as he could have if he was practicing regularly and on top form. So I think that was the issue with us in the team tournament, because you do need that solid base and then a couple more people to really take you through. Our results were just too inconsistent. So we had one round against the Spanish national team and drew. We probably should have won. The typical Blood Bowl bleating of, oh, if only this had worked for like one of three of us towards the end.
how was the weather? Was it good? Was it?
The weather was perfect Blood Bowl the entire weekend. But then yeah, we went up against other teams that maybe we felt we should have been with our extra experience. And yeah, just got absolutely ruined. So
Yeah,
it was really good.
I
We
know
played
that
some really
feeling.
good teams as well. We played Vitesse Noobs and like I said, the Spanish national team. So there was an online team that turned up as well that we faced, I think, on the second day. Can't remember who they were. Yeah, Fumble or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, something
yeah.
like that.
How did that round go?
Um, well, yeah, not great.
I actually lost that round personally, but of course the team won, which, as we
But the
heard
team won,
last week,
exactly.
is
Yeah,
much more important. There is
that's all you
no
need. Yeah,
personal records in Team Blood Bowl, so all that I take away from that was a team win.
exactly. No, no, absolutely, it was a team win.
Now, has it
Yeah, we
reawakened
like
the
to win
beast in
well.
you? I mean, we had some conversations out in Alicante about how you were feeling about Blood Bowl. I mean, you are at that age where you can probably see the end clearer than you can see the beginning.
Wow.
You've already procreated. You've fulfilled that genetic need. Um, how are you going to spend your latter years? Is it going to be with Blood Bowl, or is something else going to tempt you? Are you going to take this seriously and reach those Team England peaks, or?
So I thought we agreed in Alicante we were going to start being nice to each other.
I've invited you on the
Um,
show. How much nicer do you want me to be?
yeah, I definitely want to get back into it more seriously, and I think the tackle zone as a team is one of the vehicles to do that. To be part of a team, we're very much inspired. Obviously, we're not the quality of the guys like How Fair, but we're very much kind of inspired by what those guys have done and how formalizing a team and
Yeah.
supporting each other and training each other up and things like that is going to not just improve you as a player, but also give you that extra bit of incentive to find that spare weekend to maybe put a bit of money aside so that you can go to Italy or France or Spain to play against some of these really, really top players.
So I want to circle back to all of that, of course, because that is the topic of this evening: is how do we, if someone wanted to do that, if you wanted to be at the level of Blood Bowl where you are genuinely going thinking we can win this World Cup, what does that take? What does it look like? What does it smell like? I think that one's quite key to some people. Mike, I've described you as the ringmaster of the Children's Crusade out in Alicante, and you've told me that was unfair. Obviously, Stig probably deserves that title, taking as he did genuinely an entire busload of school children. But you had a team featuring some young people as well as some slightly older ones. How was your World Cup?
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it was. We ended up on a mixed bag team really because I left it too late to get a league team together, which is what I was originally going to try to do. So we ended up sort of half and half my league and then half some guys from London, and then we had a dropout on the Sunday before the tournament, and then managed to get just a local guy who fancied coming to Spain and happened to be free the next weekend. So that was cool. Yeah, Mini Morg was 12 and had a team with Morg in and had a lovely time, especially pitch clearing in his first round. And then we had Alex, my son, Dementor, who is a child in age. Yeah, so he's 17, he's 18 in July, and he did fantastically well. He started 0-2-2 and then finished 5-2-2.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
it was a good submarine.
So almost hard rimmed, but then didn't, pulled up at the last minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So he had a good time, and I took my Black Orcs and went 6-2-1, which I was really pleased about.
Go on,
Yeah.
drop it. And
Well, oh, I haven't got my mug. What's my mug? It's yeah.
the
So
subtle thing is to just drink from
so
it without mentioning it. I think you'll find.
I know, yeah. So my aim was to get best Black Orc, and I managed that, which was very satisfying. It's one of those meta sort of targets you have. About why you take particular races to a tournament. So I think there were about 50 Black Orc teams. So I figured it was a reasonable chance of getting that one. So managed that, and but just had a brilliant time seeing people. It was the social side as well, which was really good. Alicante sort of got taken over by blood bowlers. So you walk around the streets and see blood bowlers at every corner, which was really nice. And the organisation I thought was 90%. Which is absolutely fantastic. Complaints about the food queues and so on, but that didn't actually bother me that much.
I mean,
Was
if all
just
the
standing
things that were
around
wrong with
chatting,
it
aren't you?
are all the things that were
Yeah,
wrong with it, and I knew about them
yeah,
before going, it wouldn't have bothered me. I'd still have gone.
yeah,
I
absolutely,
mean, there were some
absolutely.
little tiny things wrong, but nothing that would have been a deal breaker to me. I was like,
Yeah,
actually, I thought it ran really, really well. Doesn't mean it couldn't be
yeah,
better, but it did run really, really well. Joe, are
yep.
you horrified at this idea of having a personal target at a team event? I don't know if you're aware, I did quote on the show last week that at the very end of it, I came across a admittedly somewhat drunk Lycos, just as the, I think, fourth hour of the awards ceremony was just starting. And I clapped him on the back, smiled and said, "Hi Dave, how did it go? How was your Blood Bowl this weekend?" And he went, "There's no such thing as me. there's no people, only teams matter, and then staggered off. Do only teams matter? Do you back your teammate?
Yeah, I think so.
Should Mike be ashamed of his personal record?
Well, no, if that's what you got to play for, then you might as well have fun with it. But yeah, I was just thinking I can't actually remember what my record was at the World Cup now. But yeah, it's that should be the target in a team event, which is just playing for your teammates and trying to get the win for overall rather than just trying to do your own thing. Because there's only one World Cup every 4 years, and there's loads of individual events, so you can do. You chase all your individual targets in every other event.
But Mike is now the best Black Hawk player in the world, Joe. Isn't that important?
Yeah, and I'm the third best Dark coach in Shropshire as well, but it's not really a huge accolade.
Biting. So, okay, I won't ask you how your World Cup went. How did your team do at the World Cup, Joe?
We did all right. We came fourth. We missed out on the podium on second tiebreaker, I think, which was pretty close. It was disappointing because we had to wait a long time to find out how close we were. But yeah, it was a really fun event. I think that was the most important thing. We had an absolute whale of a time, and I think it was a raging success in terms of organisation. I think it's easy to undersell just how difficult it is to arrange a tournament for 2,500 people as a volunteer effort. Like that is a full-time job that someone has done for free.
And somehow about 30 vendors in there as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Like, you can nitpick stuff and people will because they're nerds, but it was a miracle, frankly, especially since we saw the previous problems that arose in Dornbirn and we saw what could go wrong. So seeing basically none of those major problems happen in Alicante was just wonderful. Yeah, it was great.
There was in the comments from last week's show where we did all the touchy-feely, did we have a nice time in Alicante? Because I think it's really important that that's why everyone goes, is to have a nice time. Sure. The majority of people, sorry Joe, I know you don't. One of the things that came back is someone suggested, should it be perhaps 3 games, then 4 games, and then just 2 games on the final day? And I said, well, why does it have to be 9? Why not 3-3-2? Plenty of space for the awards and some socialising at the end of it, and just an easier schedule. Is 9? Are we wedded to that as a sport, as a hobby?
I don't think it's hugely important either way. I think the schedule in Spain was particularly baggy because that's their nature. So I think in other events in future years it will be a lot tighter. For example, if we had it in Germany, it would start at 8 a.m. and finish by 5 p.m. regardless. So it's just a cultural thing.
Okay. Is it, Dan, when we hear Joe talking about the team and that coming first, is that the sort of thing we need to be discussing tonight?
Yeah, 100%. So there's so many levels of meta going on here that the team meta between them is really important. And I remember with the brief kind of flirtation I had with Team England many years ago and talking to these guys about it, the philosophy and, up until the last World Cup, the last Euro Bowl, England, have been kind of winning, basically everything. And the strategy is you've got to have that anchor. You've got to be able to have those people in the team playing the right teams that can get draws where they need to. So it can be the most hopeless situation in the first half. Everything could have gone wrong. You can still be on for a draw second half. And once you're kind of just about halfway or just below halfway, if you can guarantee that every single round, you're going to have a really good tournament. So once you've got that anchor in place, once you know who your anchor men are on the right teams doing that, then you can go and bring in, the extra players who you feel could, if they have a really good tournament and they blitz everyone, then you're looking at a podium or winning the whole thing. So yeah, absolutely right.
Now, in terms of having that team and the team being important, there is a comment that we had from the lovely Spell Darren, or I believe that is Games Master in German. Specifically, we're going to talk to you, Joe, about your chosen strategy on all the President's Men of submarining, saying that all the President's Men went 8-0-1 at the World Cup, obviously deliberately losing that first round. Losing only in the first morning versus the Red Leaf Mercenaries, which he points out was him. He was there, part of that.
Okay.
He'd be very interested in hearing whether you would comment on that part of the discussion about if you're trying to win it all, is it even possible after one loss anymore? with the numbers we've got going in after that first loss. I mean, I'm joking. I don't think you were submarining. I saw the state of all the President's Men that morning. Frankly, I think anyone in that hall had a reasonable shot at beating you guys that morning. But then you got your shit together and presumably slept lots and didn't drink and ate healthily and coached 8 more rounds of wonderful Blood Bowl. We'll come to all of those statements in a bit. But you did lose round 1. Basically, Spelldown's point is, can you still submarine and expect to win a World Cup? Is that a thing anymore? For those that don't know, submarining, whether deliberate or not, is no matter what happens in round 1, if you draw or you lose, because of the Swiss system, instead of meeting the teams that are doing well and winning, you drop under them, and then you come up against teams that haven't got such good records, and ideally you then win everything else and end up still at the peak.
I don't think so, no. I think, as you saw, we discussed before the event that I don't think you could lose a round and win the tournament. We thought 8-1-0 would be the worst record that you could win the event with. So, yeah. There's so many Blood Bowl, there's so many variables involved. You can't be planning to lose or not win games. You just have to win what's put in front of you and then hope for the best.
So how was that? I'm a feelings person. I'm going to ask.
The previous one in Dornbirn, we had a strategy in the first round where several of our players did not score touchdowns in order to lessen our tiebreaker, in order to try and get lower into a lower opponent in the second round.
Right, so you are perfectly capable of shenanigans.
Yeah. So both Paul and I just refused touchdowns and took 2-0 rather than 3-0. And that was both to massage our tiebreaker and also to keep teams away from elf teams. So both Paul and I wanted to be further down, so we didn't play elves, so to put our elves further up the Swiss for future rounds. And then we randomly drew the other really strong English team, the Geordies, and lost in round 2. And so you just can't control the draw in an event of 372 teams. It's just not possible to try and.
I think there's something quite interesting about that Swiss within Swiss, because we felt after the first day we were on 2 wins and a draw. And when we looked at the teams on 3 wins, you looked at the Swiss within Swiss kind of tiebreakers at the bottom of the 3 points. And there were quite a few teams that maybe had a slightly easier run. They're taking maybe quite a lot of star players, and the star players just worked on day 1 and maybe wouldn't work on day 2 or 3. But then where we were at the top of the 2.5 teams, it was just mental top teams like the whole way through. And it's easy to feel a bit of grief at that point. Like, obviously, you want to play good games with good people, but it did feel a bit like, well, if we'd actually had a lower tiebreaker by not winning, the first round sort of 5-1 or something like that, we would have actually had a much easier to run towards the later tables.
Yeah, I was confused by that. I'd proudly said that, don't worry, there's no tiebreakers until the final round. Just everyone that gets a win will be drawn against everyone else that gets a win. But it seems there was internal tiebreakers within the round structure as well, wasn't there? As well as within the squads?
I don't actually know. I think there were.
No, I don't know either.
Okay, well, a mystery. Who knows?
So Joe, that strategy you were talking about, was that decided beforehand, or was it you saw that you were winning 2-0 and then had the conversation?
Oh no, that was just a spur of the moment thing we decided upon. That wasn't a grand strategy at that point. It was just a case of, well, this is going really well. Everybody's winning their games, so we can start thinking about tertiary factors.
Yeah, where do we want to put people in the structure of first board to 6th board?
Yeah.
So what would you expect to be up on the higher boards? As you said, is that where the elves tend to congregate because of their scoring records?
Well, I think in Dornbirn it was such a minor point, like it probably wasn't going to make any difference whatsoever, but we just thought it was something to try for. But yeah, because the tiebreakers would involve touchdowns scored in individual matchups, because you can't use in the second round at least, because you couldn't be using opponent score within the individual players. You obviously use that within the teams, but you can't use it within the players. So at that point, touchdowns difference and things like that would come in, which means you push the elf teams higher up because they're going to score all the touchdowns.
Now, I do have notes, as I pointed out pre-show. I've got a whole piece of paper of notes for this one. Incredible, isn't it? Because one of the things I wanted to absolutely be able to quote word for word is the better Purple. Purple Goo is too busy watching rugby to be with us this evening. But he did want to drop in his thoughts on how one wins a World Cup. And he's got a 6-point plan. So I just want to briefly discuss each point, and we'll see if we think he's being serious or is he taking the piss. So point 1 is, he says, be good. do we think being good at Blood Bowl is necessary to win the World Cup? Do you actually need 6 people good at Blood Bowl, or do you need them good at the race they're playing, or can you carry someone down in 6th position and it's probably going to be all right?
Can you win a World Cup, Joe,
Is,
with
is,
5
is this
players and one?
We almost won the World Cup with literally only 5 players
Okay.
because one of our players didn't turn up in Luca. So we took a ringer, the 27th ringer, who hadn't played Blood Bowl for 4 years, who lost all their games. And then we were on table 1 on round 9, playing against the eventual winners for the championship with 1 player less than every other team in the entire league.
So you had a human there rolling dice, but literally that was all they were capable of doing.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Do you think we need good people all the way through, Wolfie, or can you take someone that's just there for morale and mascot and maybe has a fine beard?
Definitely not. Yeah, you do need good people. I think the quality of the opposition dictates that. If you're serious about winning it, I mean, you look at a team like Corcopau, who just, they were right at the top the whole way through, and then even then didn't quite manage to get over the finish line. If they'd had even one player just like half a tier lower in quality, they're finishing sort of, maybe slightly outside the top 10. So I think the amount of teams that are likely to go to World Cup and the quality of the people that are really serious about winning it just dictates all 6 need to be top tier.
Mike, you had some stats on this, didn't you? Do the top teams have all top players? Is that what we're looking for to really get it done?
Well, they were all sort of ranked highly, if that's the same thing, I suppose. So we had this thing where all the teams in the top 10 were ranked in the top sort of 35 pre-tournament, except for Norwegian Black Metal, who massively overperformed. But certainly, Kokorapau and Azes were. I don't know how we're pronouncing that. Azaz. Oh yes. Yeah, they were ranked in the top 10, and they came in the top 10. And obviously, Joe's team and the Holy Six as well. So that suggests that it's all
over to that. We do
people.
have. There it is. It's a very large format, but you can see if you're watching, obviously visually. If you're listening, you can't see. We can see there are graphs showing that I believe you predicted using your metrics of the highest NAF ELO that anyone had ever received in the team, and then averaging those across. You predicted 6 of the top 10.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There were actually a few different ones. There was like global ELO as well, which is where you don't care about the race and so on.
Right.
And it was just a useful way of seeing who the runners and riders were, particularly if you weren't familiar with people's names. So if you hadn't played much European Blood Bowl and you just thought who are these people, then it was a reasonable way of seeing who the ones to watch were, and it turned out to be the way. So you didn't get loads of outliers. I don't know, appearing from like a cyanide team or something who'd never played tabletop before, or people who'd played in their local league and have played loads and rocked up to a tabletop tournament.
I mean, that said, I do think there was one team, Procedimiento Ilegal, who are Spanish streamers. And I think they did pretty well, having not got a particularly good NAF rankings beforehand.
But that's just a case of maybe not having played enough games, right?
I think they're all in a Discord together where they they discuss things a lot, so they probably do a lot of coordination of how they play, and I think that probably helped them. But outside of that, it was very, very successful at predicting it. That the people with good NAF records, weirdly, were able to translate that into good team performances as well. So we do think being good, his number one point, we think that's pretty valid. If we're drawing up a successful list of how to win a World Cup, number 1 on your list should be good at the Blood Bowl. Okay? Note taken. If you're not good at Blood Bowl, you've got about 4 years to get good at Blood Bowl. But nothing else we tell you is going to really help if you can't get you and 5 friends that are at least good at Blood Bowl. Number 2.
The next 5 from Purple Goo will all be good as well.
Sorry?
You just said be good 6 times.
No, it isn't. No, there are 6 different ones, and then we have a bonus added 7th one.
Nice.
From legendary thinker and Blood Bowl god Dimitri G. So from get the draw you need. Now there's a double edge to that. We've already talked about half of that. That's his point 2. When he says get the draw you need, you know him best, Joe. Does he mean who you're playing, or does he mean in your match? Which do you think he means?
I don't know. I don't know because I haven't seen the other on this list. So hopefully, both should be in there. I get lucky in the draw and who you play, and also if you take the draws, that is the number one rule of Team Blood Bowl, and that's what Dan's already alluded to in Team England. That is the mantra. It's like you just lock down the draws. You don't play for ego. You don't think, oh, I can beat this guy. I'm going to try and push it and win 2-1. You just take the draw and rely on trust your teammates that they're going to win some of their games.
So if someone on your team, for example, was determined to get best black or at all costs, that would be a detriment to the team's results. That's what you're saying.
Well, I wasn't specifically trying to call that, Mike. In this
In
particular
fairness,
instance,
No, I was.
The only game that I lost, I had a nailed-on draw, and didn't want the draw, and then I lost it. So it's that sort of nonsense that you can't
It is.
you can't have in
This
the
selfish
if you're
behaviour.
in a podium.
How important is it, though? I mean, are there teams that really could and should have done, but they got a bad round 2 and round 3 draws? Does that happen? Do people get, just randomly paired with the wrong team and, that's the World Cup line?
I don't think so. I remember Paul said to me, I said, "Oh, we got each other good," and I said, "Oh, it's a tough draw for us," and he said, "Well, it's a tough draw for them too." And that's the sort of mentality you should be having. Like, you should be expecting to beat anybody. If you want to win a cup, you need to beat everybody who's put in front of you. So you can't be thinking too much about trying to get lucky in terms of draws and races.
This may come into point 7. Dan, you and I talked about this, that we both felt our squads performing reasonably well would bubble up to a level and then hit a really good team, smash into that brick wall and drop like a stone. Could we have got luckier draws? I mean, obviously at one point you got very unlucky and you drew us. So
yeah, I mean, you can always get luckier draws. I think more important is probably the team matchups within, maybe more than who you're playing. But Joe's absolutely right. If you want to win a World Cup, you can't have the mentality of going into a draw like feeling sorry for yourself or thinking, oh, I've got a bad matchup here. You need to go into every game thinking, I can win this, or I can draw this if the team doesn't need it. So whilst I think it is true that you can be less lucky, if you think that you need to be less lucky, then you're not going to approach the game correctly.
Okay. Mike, are you on board with this, that the draw doesn't matter so much, that Phil is wrong?
I was going to ask, Joe, did you play the top 2 teams? Did you play Kokorapa and Lizas?
No, we didn't. We played. You played Kokorapa, I think. Did we? No, we played. We played Nikolai's team, Chimera.
Oh, Chimera, yeah.
One of the main favourites going into the event.
Yeah.
But there are so many teams you can't play all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the difference between Swiss, I suppose, and like knockout tournaments. In that knockout tournaments, someone can have a lucky one and take a team out maybe, and then it means you don't need to play them. Thinking about the Rugby World Cup that's going on at the moment.
Yes, absolutely.
People, we please not to play Ireland, but that's you get a lucky draw in something like the Rugby World Cup where Ireland play New Zealand in the quarterfinals. Whereas in Swiss, you tend to, people hang around, don't they?
Perfect time to discuss rugby as we've just gone to an ad break, so the live people on the Twitch feed can't hear what we're saying anyway.
Sometimes it can be the other way around,
subscribe.
though. I think sometimes it can be the other way around. If you're playing some of the teams in the midfield that maybe have a lot of star players or something, that's not the round that all the President's men want. What they want is to go up against people of their level or maybe slightly below their level that are going to play the sort of game that they're very good at playing. What they don't want to do is run into Morg X number of times and then Morg just deletes a team because the volatility of having that bad round. So sometimes you can get stuck in the midfield a bit.
It's to our detriment that we didn't get to play Kokorapau as well. Like, we wanted to play them because our route to winning the World Cup was to beat them.
Yeah.
Like, we can't let somebody else try and beat them because that doesn't work in terms of the tiebreaker and getting ahead of them. We need to get into them and beat them. And so losing our first round and thus not getting to meet Kokorapau meant that we couldn't win the tournament. So, like, trying to get an easier draw is not actually always an advantage way, the best way to win the event. You need to play the best teams and then beat them, and then that gives you like a double reward effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the classic 6-pointer from football, isn't it? that not only have you got the win, but you've harmed one of your direct opponents. And if we're saying that to win a World Cup now, you need to be looking at the least 8-1-0 or trying to go 9-0-0, then obviously that's going to knock them out of contention for anything except a podium, and put you on course. So how do we feel about the next one? We're talking about this, that perhaps the draw isn't so important. His third point is, don't get unlucky in the wrong round. Now, do you think he means that first round? A good win to get you going, or is there a point at which a bad draw is even worse, or a loss is even worse?
I suppose Joe was talking about his snake eyes in turn 8 of 2 halves. If that happens too many times in one round, then it's about getting your luck at the right. Well, that's what Blood Bowl is about often, isn't it? Or it's getting your luck at the wrong times and the right times, and so on.
Yeah, I mean that's what happens. That's how you lose a lot of team of rounds, is that you have several players being unlucky. That's why it's a particularly reflective of how big your team is as well. Like at one point, all the President's Men had won 70% of the team events they entered with 5 or more players, and 0 events they had entered with 4 or fewer players. Because the volatility in 4-player.
So who was the 5th person you invited? Because they're key.
Yeah, but the volatility in smaller team events is just so large, and the more players you get into the squad, the more you can account for one bad game.
So if you pack a team with 6 good quality people, as Davies just said in the chat, you can afford for one person to have terrible dice that round, because the other 5 should probably be able to do the job still. And then next round, hopefully someone else is having the crap dice and they're doing their job. Yeah. That makes sense. So don't get unlucky at the same time as your mates are getting unlucky is probably what we need to slightly substitute Phil's gnomic utterances there. He doesn't actually want other people to know the secret, so that's why I'm trying to work it out.
Well, that's why his writing is so short. I mean, it's not like Phil cannot write a paragraph, so I think we're all a bit stunned by that more than anything.
We come then to one I think we've touched on a lot. His point 4, and this is maybe key. He says, hate losing more than you love winning. Oh, lots of sage nodding there.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds wise when you say it, doesn't it? It's the kind of thing you'd expect one of the world's top players to just say casually about Blood Bowl. Walk past, oh, tell us something about Blood Bowl, Phil. Well, I'll tell you what. Hate losing more than you love winning. You'll be all right, son. Is that the true secret?
Well, it seems to be a common theme amongst all the President's Men. When we lose our games, we definitely do not enjoy it very at all, and when we win games, we don't really care. It's just a relief not to have lost more than it is a joy to have won. And I think that kind of thing can motivate you more, perhaps, than just the joy of trying to thrash people or beat people. And the people are motivated different ways, I think. Like, I know there are certain players in the English community I can think of who probably enjoy winning more than they hate losing. But yeah, it's definitely the way we've approached it, and might not necessarily be true.
I mean, I can think of some that enjoy a good personal record, getting something just for themselves more than they would the team win. Definitely.
Yes.
But you have to enjoy winning as a team, though. So you enjoy,
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, but that's a different thing, isn't it?
But certainly, I've always said. I mean, people do sometimes ask. You've played lots and lots of games of Blood Bowl. Do you remember what was your favourite wins and things? And I've genuinely got no idea, but I can tell you what my worst losses were. Particularly the one against Andy Davo in a Chalice final. But that's also because everyone keeps mentioning it to me. At every tournament I go to, people go, "Oh yeah, I know you. You're the guy that lost to Andy Davo." And yeah, I've seen it on YouTube. Yeah. That's fun with Andy Davo. Yeah.
Was that in a blizzard?
I don't recall actually. Okay. It was in overtime to a 9.5% play, but I'm fine with it. I don't remember at all. Nothing stuck really. So,
can I stick in something from the chat?
Sure.
BB Jock's come in with sounds marginally soulless.
Yeah, I mean that's. People have asked, do I want to be on Team England? And I've always thought, no, I'd rather have fun. Is that harsh of me? I mean, it is harsh of me. Is it unfair? Because I want to sit down and have a look at the game and try and win it. And I kind of feel Team England, I'd be told, no, just get yourself a draw.
Well, I mean, you still have to win some games. Like you're not going to get anywhere if everyone's drawing every single game. You've still got to take your win. I think the point is more you have to be prepared to grind for the team when it's necessary to grind for the team. If you're having a 20% luck game, right? So you imagine your possible distribution of all dice rolls you could have in every game that you've ever played. Some games you delete 3 people on the right. Okay, this is my 100% game. Like this is everything's working for me. Sometimes you're going to have those 20% games. And when you look at the people with the highest win rates, they're the people that can take a 20% luck game and turn it into a draw and be very happy with it. And I think that's the mentality we're talking about here. It's not setting out to draw every single game.
I don't think there's anything soulless about putting your ego aside and playing for your friends. I don't think that's not how I would approach it or how I would feel about it.
That's a very nice way to put it.
I mean, that's what makes it so different to individual tournaments, right? It's such a different mentality.
Except for Mike. Mike, have you considered putting your ego aside and playing for the benefit of the team?
I don't think my ego is dependent on winning Blood Bowl. If it was, that it would be, it would be challenged. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Also, to your point, Dave, about Team England.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people from the outside have some opinions about it, and hopefully the newsletter has sort of helped on that ways. But the feedback we've had from people like Dan and other people like Nippy, who joined the team more recently, and Pete W, is that they've been welcomed and had a great time and felt included. And I don't want to speak for them, but that's the feedback everybody's given us who's joined the team recently, and hopefully that's what it's about. It's about being a team and being friends, and not about putting pressure on people.
Yeah, and trying to still be excellent, but in a way that hopefully is.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to be good at a game and enjoying the process of trying to be good at a game. Like, it's a very English thing to try and cut people down who try and enjoy being good at something, and you can be good at something in many different ways. There are lots of people who are brilliant at this game who are lovely people, and there are other people like me who are arseholes. But it's not. They're not the same. You can be good and also be nice. You don't have to be.
I feel your pain, Joe. I feel I'm very good at talking about Blood Bowl, and yet people continuously tell me off for it.
And so you say it's an English thing. So do you think that's what is holding back the strength in depth, or one of the factors holding back the strength in depth in England is that the approach to the game?
Yeah, 100%.
Are we frightened of excellence?
It's just an English thing, isn't it? You're not allowed to talk about wanting to be good. You're not allowed to talk about being interested in things or being excited or enthused about things. Very English trait. Whereas you talk to a lot of the Europeans and they're just more. It's just a normal thing to want to enjoy your hobby and want to be good at it.
Now, I've joked about Dimmy G, and I know he's in the chat, but he's proud to say he would love, it would be a dream come true for him to ever represent Team England. I mean, somewhat of a nightmare for the rest of us, obviously, but is that the sort of attitude you want everyone to have that plays Blood Bowl? Is that the pinnacle of aspiration should be, God, I might get a shot at Team England?
Well, everyone doesn't have to think that, but if some people do, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? It's like, everyone can enjoy the game and however they want. And if the majority of people just want to, enjoy it for the fun game that it is, like Blood Bowl is a joyful game, and you can have fun doing it, and there's no reason why that shouldn't be allowed. But if you want to be good and you want to aspire for Team England, then that's great too. Like, everything should be allowed and everything should be celebrated.
And are you ready to don the pipe and slippers and go into your dotage watching a new younger generation come up?
Absolutely. I would love it if there were people pushing forward and trying to throw me out the team and make it look like I didn't belong there anymore. That'd be wonderful. It'd be good for England, and that's what I want to see.
Some young, challenging whippersnapper like Dan, for example.
I think I've peaked.
I think there are.
I peaked about 7 years ago.
Gags aside, there are some coaches that are doing really well. Some youngish coaches, like Thulian and Breakbunker came top with their respective races at the World Cup, and they are new, younger coaches who are demonstrating there are people in the community that can do well and want to be good.
Excellent. Have been there and done it at a big Euro team event. Is experience really important? I talked about Procedure Mentor Legal, getting a cracking result for largely internet heads that haven't played a lot of tabletop. Do you think that's an outlier? Do really you need that experience?
I think so. I think it's a massive advantage. Going into the World Cup and playing against certain people with certain builds that you may have never seen in an English tournament, certain mentalities, certain ways of playing that you will never have seen sort of anywhere in the UK. We used to talk quite a lot about certain skill pick. For example, so I played Lizards for most of my sort of tournament Blood Bowl. And it was always interesting whenever you went to Italy and you played Italians, it was always 5 block, 1 tackle. It's just almost universal. I don't think I've ever faced that in the UK. And you do have to approach that game in a slightly different way to how you would otherwise. And for me, the experience that I've picked up going to Tillian Team Cups, Lutece, Rug Bowl, German Team Bowl, Bilbao Cup, etc., you're not only playing against really top quality coaches, but you're seeing a different style of the game. If you're going to take that to a World Cup, you're going to be so much better off because you're going to approach a game, you're going to see someone's skill pick, and you think, right, I've played this game 5 times. I know what to do. You're not having to think for maybe the first few turns or until something goes wrong or particularly right, and that just makes the game so much easier.
But doesn't the internet help with that?
It can do, but I do find that people don't take the internet quite so seriously as maybe they do. I think it's more of an area for experimentation, and there's lots of different formats in league. So I think it does help, and there's been certain tournaments where, especially in the last couple of years, some of the top tabletop players have moved to the more internet-based tournaments, and I think that's really helped.
I think it's with the new rule set coming out, and after the 10-year ossified rules that everybody knew, everyone wants to get that knowledge of the new rule set down. And hence, we're talking Fumble mainly, of course, because they've got all the races, they've got all the stars. So it's there that I think a lot of the tabletop European players are choosing to practice because they can just get those numbers in that give them that basis of knowledge to look back on when they are facing a game.
I think to this point, it is really beneficial to have experience and, as Phil alluded to, have won stuff before because it just takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Like when you've won a Euro Bowl, then the next time you're playing in a Euro Bowl, you don't really care as much, or not. It's not you don't care as much. You don't feel as much pressure. Like it isn't the thing you're chasing anymore because you've already done it. So it's easier. I mean, there was one Euro Bowl where the French lost a round and half their players were in tears, like full floods of tears in the middle of the room, because they hadn't won it before. And that's the kind of thing, like the pressure was obviously getting to them at that point.
Yeah,
and then the more you win, the less pressure you feel because obviously it's not the final hurdle you're trying to cross. You've already reached that point before. It just relaxes you. And then when you relax, you make better decisions and you make faster decisions as well.
That's interesting. So taking the pressure off, you think, raises the level of Blood Bowl a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge part of analysis paralysis is a huge problem for Blood Bowl players, and the more pressure you feel, the more you will fall into that trap of like second guessing yourself and worrying. And then experience means that you've played this situation so many times, and so you don't have to go through that step anymore.
I like analysis paralysis, mainly, of course, because it rhymes, but also it is very descriptive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, but I've more recent years I found myself playing too fast because I just don't. I just instantly think, oh, well, I should do this then because that feels right. And then you have to start taking step backs and going, oh, actually, maybe I should spend more time worrying about things because you get too confident almost. But it's like the experience does help.
I mean, I guess that's kind of like, as an actor, I'd always say that if you stop, conquering nerves is obviously a key part of doing that job. But if you don't get nervous at all, if you get to the point where you're not getting nervous, you're probably doing something wrong because it takes you to a new level, that adrenaline and that focus that you need when you're out there on stage in front of a couple of thousand people.
Oh, sure. It's not like, there's always some sort of, it's exciting and nervous, and that's the fun of it. But like taking away the problem areas in terms of nerves is the best.
Now, let's cycle back a little bit to what Dan said. Are we all accepting as a foursome that there is a level of European Blood Bowl that is, I'm going to go out and say, better than the average level you'll find at UK tournaments? That seems to be enshrined within the latest Team England documents, for example, Joe. It talks about, the ideal candidate will have had experience not just playing in UK tournaments, but playing abroad, because there is a different and implied better standard available in some of those continental tournaments.
I think I would echo Dan in that the implication there was the difference rather than the standard, although that is a separate point that maybe I would agree with. But I think the newsletter was just implying that what Dan said earlier, if you go to different countries, you'll see and experience different styles of Blood Bowl, and then you will not be facing them the first time when you get to a World Cup or a Euro Bowl. But they used to be a thing like the Italian Skaven roster like 15 years ago, which was like double Mighty Blow on the Skaven blitzes and stuff like that. And if you've never seen that before and you're coming up to play for it the first time, then it's a lot different than having faced it and know what's going on and see what they're how they play and what they're doing.
Yeah, that's not a build I would think of as particularly necessarily good.
I wouldn't say that's good anymore, but like that was what they were doing. And
but it would be surprising to face, and it would, as you say, raise new challenges in terms of what do you screen with, what do you hide, what do you prioritise. Exactly. Interesting. I actually found to some degree the opposite, that sitting down opposite Andy Davo, obviously from the Tackle Zone team, we both just by pure chance happened to be on board one. I never was again. And the fact that I played him online and it had gone very well, I'd only not won because of a similar story to Joe's. I snaked over the line to score, which would have won the game, so we got a draw instead. So I sat down feeling actually perhaps overconfident, and I perhaps didn't give him the threat level I should have done. Andy is a very good coach, and I perhaps there was a stall I did that I perhaps shouldn't have done. I perhaps could have just done it a safer way had I been maybe prioritising safety rather than personal glory. So I think there's a lesson for me there. I came away from that feeling that Andy had outcoached me. I'd taken some bad decisions, not necessarily bad dice. And I think that's something we need to own up to as well when we've got it wrong. Are they better than us, Mike?
I don't know. I'm probably the least. I don't know. Well,
and with Brexit making them even more expensive to go to, are we screwed now? Are they just going to, like the 80s in football, are we just going to stagnate?
I think I'm the third most travelled of this foursome. So I'm least. I've only really gone to Euro Bowls internationally, and I've quite regularly found myself not doing as well as I would have hoped to do in my individual games, because I've been to lots of big UK tournaments, and done reasonably. But yeah, it's always been a step up in terms of Euro Bowl. Has always been a step up in standard, but that's what you'd expect because that's sort of the best 8 from each country. So I don't know how that translates into sort of big team tournaments outside of Euro Bowl and Europe and things like Lutece. I don't think that's necessarily better than the UK Team Championship, but I don't know. Could be wrong. And then there's some. I know lots of people are going to Tilia, aren't they, for the team tournament there? Will that have as much as high a standard as European? Maybe, I don't know.
Do we need more team tournaments? Is that a thing?
The more, the better. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they are the best.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I've found as well is maybe when you get right to the top end, England, France, Italy, Spain, maybe they're quite close at the very, very top end. Denmark as well, top end. But it's the strength and depth that you see. You'll go to Lutece, you'll play a French coach with like a 170 rating, and he will give you a game, like a ridiculously good game, and you're like, glad I got away with that one. Like Joe saying earlier, kind of the relief of not losing, just squeaking over for a win. And what it means is they're practicing against each other all the time. So they're really supporting each other. And I feel that in the UK, maybe we don't have quite as much of that. And maybe we don't have as much experience playing them. So one of the things that we're doing with Tackle Zone now is we're going to start a new international team tournament. So we're going to try and get a lot more of the European players over. We're going to be running it at UK Games Expo. It's going to be teams of 6, like the World Cup, to give people those 6-player practices. Everything else is still being decided. K-Food is writing the rules. D for Dan's doing a lot of the organisation behind it. So we'll be announcing more things to come. But
so are you the Andy Davo of this organisation, Dan? Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, absolutely.
You're the pretty boy standing at the front, taking the credit, but doing none of the work.
I'm going to have to start practicing my my signature.
So if K-Film's doing the rules and D for Dan's doing the organising, Are you doing the computer? Are you the computer fella?
Well,
No.
yeah. I mean, I've technically got access to getting a new website up. I mean, I probably won't write much on it.
So how exciting! A new 6-person tournament. That's going to be the biggest held in the UK. There's no one else doing 6 people right now, is there?
Yeah, and we've got spaces. Provisionally, we're going to start 32 teams. We think we can handle 32 teams of 6 players.
That's quick mental maths. 200 players.
No. Yes. Yeah, just under 192 or something.
198.
Michael Tallis, he's the maths.
Yeah, it is. 192 is right.
We got it right then. Yeah, so we're hoping that being centrally located in Birmingham means that access will be quite easy to get to. One of the great things I thought about Alicante as a location for the World Cup is it's very easy to leave people to their own devices. You didn't need to over-engineer things like accommodation or food or anything like that. People, and Birmingham's a big international city. It's got all of those things.
So if it's Birmingham, is body armour being provided?
Well, I think if you stick to the conference centre, you should be okay. And yeah, one of the great things about being at the UK Games Expo, we're going to drop it down to 5 games so that on the Sunday, especially, people have a bit more time. Going to do it maybe a bit Spanish style, slightly longer lunches so that people can walk around the games room. But obviously, we're hoping it's a big draw that people might come for the Friday as well, and maybe spend that sort of looking around the games and shopping, and then focusing on the tournaments on the Saturday and Sunday.
And I think Birmingham International Airport's right by there as well, isn't it? So actually, in terms of
so it's really easy train access from the airport. Really easy to get into town. So yeah, we're hoping that it's just that's all going to be very easy for people.
Is there any fee?
Any fee?
Is that at the venue?
Yeah, so you do have to pay for the UK Games Expo ticket, which will be the majority of the cost. And there'll be a small fee on top of that for the team tickets. We're going to run it as you buy a team ticket for 6 people. But that will be a very nominal fee. It'll only be like a few pounds just to cover sort of prizes and things like that. We're trying to make that cost as small as possible because we obviously know that entrance to the UK Games Expo isn't exactly cheap and by itself.
Lovely answer. My question was actually, is it at the NEC, the National Exhibition Centre?
The NEC, yeah. So we'll put more information. We will get the Tackle Zone website up and running again. It won't look like the old one. It'll be very much focused on the team tournaments and our tournament exploits.
And I promise to stop taking the piss. And then and it's when? It's early May, isn't it? Or is it?
I think it's early July.
Early June. Early June.
Yeah, early June.
Okay, so we now actually have also, if we're talking about sort of news, there are 2 team events going on in March now. So as well as this lovely 6-person one in June, and we've got the UK TC, which is now the back end of August. Both the first weekend in March and the third weekend in March is going to see 2 team events. One down in Kent and the other one in Peterborough. So one in the Midlands and one in the South. So there is, we're starting to get more team events. Is that going to help us push on in terms of winning the World Cup? Getting that team experience, and does it mean we need to go and start thinking about playing as a team rather than as 4 individuals that, have the same silly shirt on?
That's worth saying. Where the UK team has won the World Cup, hasn't it? Is that right? In Amsterdam?
Yes.
Yeah. So Joe and Goo have won it.
Yeah. So Purple Goo, me and Jim Jimley were on that team alongside Leipziger, Ambush, and Podfree.
Well done. Congratulations.
So just do do whatever happened there.
Yeah, just do what they did.
So Joe, is more team competitions going to help us get, as a nation, stronger at team competition Blood Bowl?
More good competition, yeah. I mean, it's about the quality of the event. If the players at the event are good, then that is going to help. I think the point you mentioned at the very beginning was like, is playing more tournaments better? I think it's a case of quality over quantity. The decision that we all made, the players in All the President's Men made, 12, 15 years ago now, was to play less tournaments but better tournaments, and so put our time and money into going to big foreign tournaments where lots of strong players would be, rather than just smashing a tournament every weekend. So there was, wherever that may be, if that's down the Dog and Duck or whatever, with like some local players who only play once a year, there's no value in just winning games. There's more value in losing games, and the way you do that is by playing better players. I think that's another if we're trying to get better, that's what people should be looking to do, is to test themselves. And so whilst all of what he's done with the rankings is really, really interesting, the most important thing for people, one of the important things for people should do, is not to worry about their ranking and worry about whether they're getting good or not. You're much better off losing ranking points in a game that you lose and then you learn something from it than you are in, smashing some people, getting some points, and having a high number.
But high number good.
Winning good.
High number makes smile.
Trophy make more smile.
But if I'm 240 and then the next week I'm 250, Joe, I'm provably better. I'm a better person. Isn't that how numbers work?
That is an opinion that we disagree on, I believe. But yeah,
Okay.
I think that's the central point that everybody on my team shares, is that you just want to be good at this game. You don't want to chase the numbers.
So, again,
but at the same time, the numbers do indicate goodness.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But they are massageable. There are people who are deliberately massaging their numbers in order to chase that meta goal, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I've done that at certain points and thought it would be really cool to get this number at this time. But then once you've hit that number, then you can change your meta goal to something else, which is
for example, just spending a year and a half only playing Dark Elves, something like that,
Yeah, people can do it. It's fun. Enjoy your game. Enjoy what you want to do. But I'm just saying that if you want to win a World Cup, which is what this podcast is about,
yes,
then you should be trying to get good. And the way to get good is to lose games, not to win them.
Well, I mean, specifically, actually, it's to not care about winning or losing. It's to learn from the game states you're in.
Yeah, to be more specific, is to put yourself in a position where somebody might outplay you and beat you, rather than to hide into games where you're definitely going to win.
Yeah. I remember going to a tournament, and the first time I faced Underworld live, first of all, I thought, oh my God, this is going to wreck Blood Bowl. And then I thought, no, they're going to beat me. Now how and why? And then next time it was a bit harder for them to beat me. And then the third time I played, actually the third time they wrecked me too. And the fourth time. But by the fifth time, I'd got a bit of a handle on some ways to maybe make Underworld at least think a little bit about what they're doing. And then the sixth time they had Varric, and I had to work it all out again. But I get what you mean. There are times that you actually lose a game and you walk away thinking, do you know, I've gained so much from that I think the next tournament I go to, I'm going to be absolutely lethal.
Well, that was interesting about. There's something Dan said earlier actually about feeling aggrieved if you come up against if you sort of draw or whatever and come up against a better coach, then I would rather do that. I'd rather play almost all the time. I'd rather play a better coach than a worse coach. But then at the World Cup, it's obviously easier to win the World Cup if you play against poor coaches.
But at the NAFC, I span in a round my good friend Kofod. I'd rather have not done. I'd rather have faced someone else and someone else beat him. I didn't beat him.
Because your aim was to win the NAF Champs. Your aim wasn't to get better at Blood Bowl.
He rolled some snakes and lost. I didn't beat him. I'd rather someone else had beaten him and I'd beaten someone that I could actually have beaten. But yes, okay, perhaps my goal wasn't getting better at Blood Bowl. That might be the case.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a perfectly reasonable point, and that makes a lot of sense. But as I said, we're talking about how you win the World Cup, and the way you do that is to get yourself in a position where you are capable of winning that game, and then on the day you don't care anymore. Like, you spend 4 years trying to play as many tough opponents as you can, with the hope that you don't have to actually do that on the day and you get super lucky. And that's great. We all want that to happen because that's our goal. Our goal is to win the World Cup, and let's get lucky on that one weekend and spend the previous 4 years worth of weekends
getting ready in case we're not lucky. We're ready to do something about that.
Exactly.
It's interesting. I mean, again, the acting analogy, it's the same with auditions. You have to go into the room wanting it more than anything else in the world, but then walking out not caring if it's happened or not, or else you go insane. And being able to live on those two mental planes is often the hallmark, I find, of peak performance in whatever atmosphere. He's only got one other point, so I just want to throw that out in front of us as we're already an hour in, before we start looking at some lovely graphs that we have from Mike, which are all very interesting. Never go to bed early. Now, twist there. I think we were all expecting late, weren't we? Is he just showing off at what a young, studly man he is? He's got 10 years on me, that purple goo. Not only is he the better purple, he's the younger purple. I love him. Great man. Proud to call him my friend. Should we also be looking at... I don't think he literally means the 3 hours of sleep that I averaged in Alicante. I do think I probably needed more. But I had a hell of a good time. I really did. I did some very stupid things, but it was lots of fun. Is the fun? Does you have to dial that back a bit, or is he right? You can still go out and have a good time, and that can still lead to good performance. Joe, what do you think?
Okay. Well, I don't want to talk too much, but that's what I believe. Like, you're there to have fun. You're there to make memories, make friends with new people you never met before, and have a great time. And that should be your first priority.
Dan, I never saw you out after 11 p.m.
Because you were in bed by that time.
Were you sleeping too much?
No, I was out. I was out crazy late. Most nights, even when all the lightweights in my team had gone off to bed themselves. If I can maybe expand on that point, I think it's really important to be part of a team where everyone is mates. I think, Joe's going to be far too modest to be talking about these things, but I think one of the big success of all the president's mates are their mates. They've spent a long time with each other. They've got good memories. They've won things together. They've lost things together. And what it means is when it comes to these crunch games, they're not feeling that added extra pressure of, feeling like maybe they're the imposter in the team. They're not feeling anything but a huge amount of support. And it's one of the best things about Team Blood Bowl is, sometimes it doesn't matter that you've lost because the rest of your team has won. And people will be carrying each other through those times, especially when it gets to the more pressured side. You can't do that if you go to these tournaments and just act robotic the whole way through. You need to have some late nights. You need to have some messy nights, and the team strength, the team bonds that will be created from that make you a much better team.
Really? I mean, Mike, you must have got a lot of sleep. You had children.
I did get a lot of sleep. Yeah. Well, I got a lot of sleep. I don't necessarily function very well if I don't have much sleep, and it wasn't necessarily to do with the Blood Bowl. It was to do with captaining, I suppose. I wanted to get my children, not my children, other people's children as well, to the right place. I wanted to get up in time for the bus and things like that. So I did get sleep in Alicante, but I had a lovely time as well. So it's very much horses for courses, I think.
Someone has just pointed out in the chat, I did actually fall asleep once during someone talking to me. That did happen. I'm blaming the alcohol and the fact that it was Dan talking. Yeah. But actually not that Dan. It was D for Dan, who's much nicer but much more boring.
He's the better Dan.
The better Dan, yes. Well, now you know what it's like to have someone with your name be better than you.
So does that make... So is the seventh point then to be friends with your team?
No, the seventh point was added by Dimmy G, and I think we've covered this with Joe. Dimmy G was once asking everyone how you would beat Purple Goo. And I said, be better at Blood Bowl and get good dice, obviously. And he went, no, confidence. I think I could beat him. I'd just have to sit down and believe that I could. So after his 6, Dimmy G timed up with confidence. Purple Goo checked notes and went, yes, you're right, that should be 0.7. Should it be 0.7? Do you need to believe?
You need to not write yourself off.
Yeah.
For a start, I remember playing.
How very English. Come on, are we being too English here, Joe?
I was talking to Triple
I need to think that I won't be the last person, yes.
And he said that he was playing this one game and he made this massive error. He was just columning up, but he counted wrong. And there was just a channel like through his team. And the other guy didn't take it because he was like, well, I'm playing Triple Sky. He knows what he's doing. This is clearly a trap. So he kind of gets away with like a big mistake like that. So, yeah, you've got to have some confidence. If you really want to beat Purple Goo, go to Cam Dubs because he'll play Goblins and that's your best chance.
But do you sit down and go, hey, have you checked my NAF out? Right, let's roll some dice.
Where's David with his 5 NAF trophies as rerolls? The people that use NAF trophies as rerolls, that's got to be a psychological thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, I've got to get one more painted and I'm going to start doing that. Is that okay to like put your NAF trophies out? Whop your e-penis on the table and go, look at that. Is confidence ever toxic? Is it ever too much? Do we not have enough? Do we need more confidence? I heard lots of people going, I'm just going to go to the World Cup and have fun. I didn't hear anyone outside of Wulfyn telling me that they were going to go and win the World Cup. So
I definitely said
I seem to recall that.
No, but you can have a quiet confidence. You don't need to be egotistical about it. And as to a point that Joe raised earlier, if you've won a tournament before, then why not have the confidence to go in? If you've played the top players at these other tournaments, you're going to pick up some wins along the way, and that's going to give you the confidence again to just be calm enough to play yourself. Yeah, it requires a lot more than confidence, but that confidence in yourself to make the right decision at the right time is important.
Confidence. Joe, are we confident enough in this country? Do we push ourselves enough? Go sit down and think, this is winnable. They should be frightened of me.
No, but it's definitely a key. It's one of the things that you need. It's just a functional thing. I think really, it's like you need to approach the game as if you are going to win it. You can't defeat yourself before you even start moving your models or making decisions or rolling dice. You need to go into every game assuming that you have a fair chance of winning, and then you'll make decisions based upon that fact.
So lovely
and
BB
this-
Jock, who was on last week, like yourself, Mike, a Scotsman, just talking in the chat, saying that for his first game he sat down and it was opposite Mankiz. He sat opposite him and said he'd just won the Welsh National. Is that an all right way to open a conversation, to sit and play Blood Bowl? To, as I said, to just say, look, this is me. It comes back to the very old Jimmy Fantastic but Purple Goose story, doesn't it?
That's a good one.
It's one of my favourites. But was Jimmy wrong to have that level of confidence? To try and use it to, surf it to success? Is that something we're frightened of doing in the UK?
Well, you don't.
Is that confidence or intimidation?
Yeah, there's a difference between confidence and bragging, isn't there? You don't need to tell anybody before the game who you are or what you've won. You need to just make decisions based upon self-belief, and that doesn't need to be externalized in any way. It's just a case of trying to perform to your best.
So you can think you're better than everyone else, but you shouldn't tell them.
Correct.
Okay, good, noted. I'll try a bit more of the second bit.
Although there was one small London team tournament where Joe and I were on a team with Mark Elston, Nippy Longscar, and all three of us independently decided to wear our England shirts for that weekend. So maybe we should practice what we preach.
The humble brag, just never mentioning it, just wearing them.
Yeah, and then I lost to a 12-year-old in that event.
Yeah, I know we've touched upon it
more than their team did.
But the sight of Mini Morg rolling dice against some of the top players in Europe was one I will treasure from Alicante. That lad just doesn't, and I hope he isn't listening to this, he just doesn't give a damn, does he? I swerved the fuck that I was going to put in there, and now I've put it in, so gosh. What can I say? That lad just doesn't care, does he? He'll roll dice against anyone.
He was loving it. He was I think everyone really enjoyed the games against him as well. So, yeah.
No, it's another thing bringing over from acting.
Maybe not when they got destroyed, but
when we look at how we move as actors, as adults, we have lots of things that we codify into our body that children don't. So we try and look at how children move because they're much freer in how they move and how they express themselves. Is that a thing in Blood Bowl 2? Is he at 12 just hasn't learned to be frightened yet, hasn't learned to be jaded, just believes in the dice, believes in his ability, just goes for it, sees what happens?
Well, this is the thing. He probably tries the nonsense that works sometimes and doesn't work other times. And he's not going to win all his games that way, but he'll win some. And then he had Morg, which obviously helps. If you can wipe out your opponent every now and again. But it is the thing about. I think Joe was saying earlier about playing someone where you can recognise their style of play. Every now and again you come up against a coach who tries nonsense and the dice work and you lose. And that's a thing.
I had an interesting experience, and I talked to Dan a little bit about this. So this is something that I think there's something missing from this list, and it might be about the play the top Europeans more. I felt there was a meta in Alicante that I wasn't up on, that I didn't quite get. Specifically, there was a couple of times I rolled into guys who had 11-person rosters with only 2 rerolls and no bribe, and were still dropping sort of 5-6 fouls a game, still taking on the 4+, 5+ shots on turn 2. and not seeming to mind that their very limited reroll supply and very limited numbers of actual players were, to my sort of risk-averse brain, incredibly at risk from this play. Is there just a more aggressive tabletop style in team competitions that I'm not keying into, do we think? Dan, what do you think?
I don't think so. I encountered that a bit as well, but I think that's probably more the level of table that we were on in kind of that like bouncing around the second to maybe third tiers. I don't think you see that quite as much on the top tables. I think they will take risks that can surprise you, but they don't seem to be pure luck take risks, just like randomly falling fouls and things like that. I think if they are going to do that, they build for it. So yeah, maybe Joe's a better one to answer this, having been on the top tables at the World Cup.
Do you find the meta is different up there? Is there a more aggressive style, a more sort of offense positive type of play that you tend to find in European teams?
The Europeans are a lot more aggressive, I find, particularly with fouling. And this was even before sneaky get was a factor as it is now. Like even 10 years ago, they would just happily just throw fouls in all the time, just everywhere they could. So it's definitely a different style of play. I don't think it's better necessarily, but that's definitely one of the styles of play you will encounter.
I mean, I went to bed. Well, I say went to bed. I mean, I staggered into my pit at about 5 a.m. one morning, and as I was lying there trying to find some sleep, one of the things that kept going through my head is Blood Bowl is a game that tilts a lot of people, that causes a lot of stress in people that play it. We're trying to master risk. We're trying to come up with these wonderful plans. I've always called it the hubris engine, that crime of the sin against the will of the gods. Have we all collectively got PTSD from the times Blood Bowls hurt us? And are we too frightened of it hurting us again? Whereas in Europe, are they a lot more laissez-faire, sanguine about these risks and these hurts? And they know there's 5 people next to them that will be rolling the dice and getting some wins. So if one of them just spectacularly face plants, it's not the end of the world.
Wait, that's one of the key skills of being really good at Blood Bowl is recognizing where rolling a 5+ is a really good decision on turn 1 if that need be. Like Jim Jimny is the master of that in terms of the English scene. He plays completely opposite to someone like Purple Goo or myself, who are very much more reserved. And if he sees a dice roll to win a game, he'll just go for it, because why not? You've got the rest of the game if it doesn't work. So if I remember one game he surfed both his opponent's war dancers on turn 1, just through a variety of dice rolls. And it's just like, well, why wouldn't I try and do that? If I got this opportunity to do this series of dice rolls that can achieve that result, then why wouldn't I try and go for that?
Dad, do you think I've got a point? There's a collective PTSD from all the times the dice have hurt us?
Yeah, to a degree, but I think again the better players are kind of managing that. They're realizing things went wrong, even though it was the best odds. So it's about taking the time when those things happen and building contingency around it. So don't not do it because you've had it gone wrong before. Find a way that it maybe doesn't matter quite so much if it doesn't go the way that you want it to. Put that plan B in place. We've all had those stories where the last roll of the dice didn't work out for us. What could we have done to not have to roll that last roll of the dice? And I think sometimes being too conservative, you delay the big dice rolls until nearer the end. And then when it goes wrong, well, what can you do about it? It's the end of the half. It's the turnover. So
perhaps a 4+ on turn 2 was better than a 6+ on turn 8.
Potentially, and I think maybe the newer rule set where you can have the multiple rerolls per turn, and potentially you can go for something a bit earlier. Try to win the game maybe a little bit earlier than you otherwise would. One of the things I found playing Lizards as a control team is that the way that my results kind of got better was to reduce the number of dice rolls that I would make into kind of a smaller amount, less risk. But the problem is that every single dice roll is then more important because you're rolling fewer of them in order to get the same result. So maybe a different style while I'm rolling more dice rolls, but each one matters a little bit less as a conscious choice is the better way to go. And, some of that's stylistic. Some of it is just intuitive, whether it feels right or not.
Isn't this what I'm talking about? That you have, due to risks failing in the past, you've become risk averse. You've pulled into
I
a
think
conservative, very control style, and that
for me
actually
it
in
was
Europe, and
more
maybe
silly
because my
things
thesis
like
leads up to the idea that perhaps we're playing too much Blood Bowl.
I,
Perhaps it,
I don't think again, I think it's the lessons you draw from it. So, for example, one of the first time I played Lizards, it was at Dungeon Bowl. I put a Saurus next to the ball because, of course, you always put a player next to the ball. Skink runs up, fails it. Of course, it falls into the Saurus. He doesn't catch it. It falls outside of my screen. Gutter runner. And now, when I pick the ball up, I just move my screening line just one thing forward. So it's like, don't not do the thing you're going to do because of the thing that's gone wrong in the past. Look at little ways to adjust. Just
yes,
one square
mitigate the
adjustment.
risk. A bobble
Yeah,
box,
exactly. Yeah.
that's sometimes called, is make sure the bobble box, so where if you misfield, where can it bounce to, is also areas under your control.
So one of the reasons why I started to play Underworld was because I wanted deliberately to play a team that was more volatile, where I was going to deliberately roll more dice, because I wanted to try and stretch myself into playing a different style that I'm not really comfortable with,
Sure.
in order to be a bit more expansive. And yeah, it's not really worked out. Again, it's very kind of much against my intuition. I fall back into old styles, but I've enjoyed the exercise of trying to play in a different way. So I think it's about how you adapt to these things, to learn from them to use for your next game, rather than just kind of shutting down.
Mike, are you the exception to my thesis here? Because obviously you took Black Orcs, a team that was doomed to failure, and that any level of experience would have told you was a terrible, terrible race to run in any format.
Yeah,
So,
fourth worst win ratio, I think, in the yeah, just
so what put the happy
slightly
smile
above
on your
20s.
face taking them in? And do you think I might be right about our collective aversion to risk
I
producing perhaps
think
a too safety-minded concept
I,
in
I think
UK
it
Blood
comes
Bowl?
down to confidence, because with enough maths, you know the probability of something working, but what you don't know is what effect that could have on the game. So where Joe was talking about risk against reward, you can work out the risk, but you don't always know the reward. So if you start doubting yourself, that if you take something risky and it doesn't work out, then you have to have the confidence to know that that was definitely the right thing to do for the game. Whereas if you just try something nonsense and it doesn't work out, and you think, oh well, maybe I shouldn't have tried that, then that's where you can go back on the and just become more conservative, because you could definitely think I took that risk and it didn't work out, whereas it's harder to think I didn't take that risk and then I lost because I didn't take that risk.
I mean, Dimmy G is going to be grabbing the tissues in chat with the amount of mentions of confidence so far. But I do think there's something really interesting about mindset and self-belief. There was a game I was having some very troubling dice in, and they had a lovely bunker stall right on the touchdown line, ready to step over at will. And I had vanishingly few elves left. But I was able to create enough doubt in their mind that this incredibly stable bunker would still stay stable by getting a witch elf sort of halfway through to it. That despite not really needing to, they stepped over and gave me 2 turns to score back, which I then did to get the win. And it was really about their self-belief, not about anything that actually happened on the table itself. No one was touched. I literally did a turn where I made 3 dodges and failed the 4th one. But the look on his face, all belief drained from him, and he went over the line. Is the sort of experience we're talking about the experience that still gives you that belief in that moment, or?
Yeah, for me, certainly it is. Some of my games that I've enjoyed the most and been proudest of the results of have been getting those draws in situations where you almost had no right. At one Tillion Team Cup, I was playing Lizards against some Wood Elf guy. It was absolutely battering me, for the second half. I was often moving my cage literally just one square to the side, and I knew that I just needed to kind of have a shot at the end. But because I've played enough games against players of that quality, I've got the confidence that, okay, I can't control the outcome of the dice, but if I just keep calm, don't write myself off despite being, X number of players down or whatever, and just go for it. Sometimes it works out. And so it's about having the confidence within the game as well. If things start to go a bit wrong, it's easy to start, counting the number of casualties they've had versus how many you've had, start feeling a bit sorry for yourself. But, often the second half is a completely different game. Just just stay in the game, just be tenacious.
Yes, just wait around for the good dice.
Yeah.
It's that lovely quote from Last of the Mohicans, isn't it? Just stay alive, the good dice will find you.
Word for word.
Yeah, I think that's Last of the Mohicans. At least that's how I always quote it. We did have a comment from a person whose name I'm not going to read out because I do believe their name contains a racism, and I'm not going to do that. But it came on Reddit. It said, "How to win in 27? I think we need the rules first, and then pick which French team will win." Are the rules and indeed the races, not the race of the people coaching, but the races we pick, are they actually that important to winning the World Cup? Does it matter? Won't the same teams find the same exploits no matter what the rule set is?
Yeah, pretty much. This is always the great myth, isn't it? That whenever a rule set comes out, every team individually thinks that they will be the only genius who determines what the secret formula is, and that no one else will arrive at that same point, despite it being practiced in the open on the internet. And everyone's going to see the same thing. All the good players will come to the same sort of conclusions, not necessarily the same exact ones, but they'll pick the options that work from within the platter in front of them.
Can you see what I'm doing here, Mike? I'm segueing into one of your lovely stack graphs, aren't I?
I can't remember which one. But the point is, why does the rule set matter? Yeah, Joe, you seem as if you might not like the Eurobowl rule set, but so why does that matter so much in that case?
Well, the rule set matters because of the volatility. If, for example, the World Cup we just been to banned the use of the combination of sneaky git and a bribe, because of the huge volatility and non-Blood Bowl that happens when that is allowed. And so if that is allowed, then there will be much less ability for good coaches to leverage their good decisions and much more ability for people to just foul people and kill them all.
Hang on. Are we saying that the ability to foul well isn't good coaching?
Yes.
Ooh, controversy. Are we happy with that as a statement, Dan? Mike? That the fouling meta needed to be curbed because it prevents good Blood Bowl.
It needed to be curbed. Yeah, I think there's different levels of fouling. I think the issue with sneaky git especially is what are you giving up for it? You know, almost every team at one point was taking sneaky git on a player. You could get almost a free foul and then reposition them back. You know, you weren't giving anything up for that, and you had a random shot at taking a player off. Well, okay, well if that's the situation, then why doesn't everyone take that? Well, they absolutely should. And now it's just a case of, am I consistently rolling higher dice than Joe? And what can Joe do about that, right? Nothing at all. So that massively levels the playing field in terms of those results. So
isn't it your choice to have given me a player I can foul? Can't you coach your team in a way that keeps those players safe?
Someone. You can always foul someone.
No, that's not how it works, though, is it? You've seen that with the underworld thing you were referring to earlier. Like, if you remove one or two people on line of scrimmage, there's no way you can protect your remaining 9 players against the 14 underworld. That's just not a possibility for anybody. I think the underlying rationale for my previous statement is that anybody can win a game when their opponent isn't playing the game. If your opponent has no players, then anybody can win that game. So the skill in Blood Bowl is winning when your opponent does have players.
Yes, I mean, from coaching Dark Elves, I've been spending a year and a half winning without usually getting a single casualty. You know, just pushing a few people around, hardly ever doing casualties, and still trying to find ways to win the game. Which has been very interesting.
We're talking about improving, and one of the most common things you hear after a game when you're playing someone is like, "Oh, I didn't kill 7 players, therefore I didn't win," and that is one of those common things you hear out of people, and that's not how you improve at the game. The way you improve at the game is like, what could I have done to try and win, even though I didn't kill everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what's interesting, and that's what you try. Anybody can win that game when you kill 7 people. That you earn your corn when you don't kill them, and you have to make a decision and think about it.
Can we accept that the weather is allowed to stop you winning?
Never.
Yes, I think that's really calm.
Good.
In losing that final, wasn't it, Dave?
Yeah, definitely. Right, so when we're going to win the World Cup, are we going to take just one team? Are we going to work out from the meta one team? Now, I'm going to show you a piece of paper made for us by the lovely Mike. Let me just make sure we've got the right thing up. There we go. And what it shows you, very small, let me invigorate it, is these are the... Sorry, go ahead, Mike. Explain to us what we're looking at.
So these are the races taken by the top 10 teams. So you've got Dark Elves and Shambling Undead were taken by 8. Skaven and Underworld were taken by 7 of the top 10. And then you've got Wood Elves, Lizard Men, Amazon, Orc, and then a load of slightly more random ones. But the top 5, Dark Elf, Undead, Skaven, Underworld, and Wood Elf.
Now, what really surprised me when I first looked at this is I expected there would be 2 or 3 races with 10 out of 10. That of the top 10 teams, everyone would have had a Dark Elf, an Undead, and an Underworld. And they haven't. Only 7 of the top 10 teams took an Underworld roster, despite everyone saying Underworld are going to be fantastic and have got great win rates. Only 8 of them took Dark Elves, which I felt were on every single team in Alicante, as far as I could tell. But they weren't on 2 of the teams that finished in the top 10. Someone in the top 10 took Slan. Someone took Imperial Nobility, for goodness sake. And one poor person was made by their team. Presumably, they're not loved by their team, or they've done something horribly wrong, like brought vegan food to a team event or something. Someone was made to coach Chaos Renegades, and I think that team needs to say sorry to that poor coach. When you guys see this, I don't know if you've seen these guys. They're on the stream. I don't know if you can see it. Are you surprised? Chaos Chosen, 2 Chaos Chosens, 2 Khornes on the top 10 teams. Are you surprised there isn't more uniformity by what people were taking at the very top end of the World Cup?
I think if you did the same for Euro Bowl, then there was some omnipresence usually, aren't there? I think you see a lot more from the top 8. So when obviously Euro Bowl, you've got 8 teams. I think there are some where there would be 100% representation. Okay. But maybe because it's 6, it's obviously more variety.
I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised. There is like the top 10. There's some degree of musical chairs. Like the 10th team and the 20th team could be interchanged, and then that might completely swing the numbers. So you don't know what the top 10 isn't necessarily reflective of the best 10 teams. That's where the music stopped on that round. But I'm surprised that it isn't close together. I wouldn't have thought there would be that large a variety of teams, like the Chaos Chosen and the Khorne and stuff like that.
For Team England, I know you can't speak for Kokoro Pau and Azez and all the other legendary teams of Europe, Blockers Without Borders and others, Chimera. But in Team England, is there a collective decision as to what races need to be taken, and then they're allocated amongst the 6, or do people choose their own races?
Well, in all the President's Men for this World Cup, we
totally different thing.
We made a group decision and we talked about it amongst ourselves, and then obviously there was some input from individual players about what they would prefer to play, but there was a definite somebody had to take Underworld was our decision primarily, and then nobody wanted to do that because it's boring, so we ended up giving it to Dave, and he was happy to do that because it's a good team-man.
Because it's all about the teams, not about the individual.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's in the end we settled on there was 8 teams that we thought probably were about right, and then we picked 6 of those that we were happy with and felt that somebody wanted to play and someone was good with.
As we're on advert
was that 8 the top 8 in there?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The graphics gone now, but it's pretty similar. Yeah, I mean we ended up we were the Tomb Kings because our French coach Gorgo was very practiced with those, and he'd been running those for a while, and he felt confident with those, and so that's why we took those.
I thought they were a good pick in the World Cup. I thought they got a nice rule set.
He did great. The rules worked for them. I think he was very happy with them, and we were happy with him.
I was a bit surprised my friend Krista chose Skaven over Tomb Kings, which I think he's better with. And I'm not sure it was necessarily a good decision for his happiness in terms of Blood Bowl either. Dan, do you think it's important to get the races right? Is that something that, as the new powerhouse of the coming England force, the tackle zone is going to be telling people what races they bring?
To a degree, I think it's very dependent on the rule set, because I think that can move around quite a lot. And even when teams are in the same tier, the addition of one skill for everyone might change, whether you want a Dark Elf or a Skaven or something else in place. One of the things we're going to try and do is make sure that everyone's got basically 2 first choice teams, so that they've got the ability to move between the 2. And that way, if a rule set comes along that maybe isn't quite in favor of your first team, that you've got a backup that you're comfortable with.
So high elves and dark elves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, all manner of elves. I mean, you do want them in the same style, I think, because, well, maybe not high elves and dark elves, but if you're playing a control team like dark elves, then maybe you want another control team, because that's the thing that suits your style. But then the meta will shift slightly. So I do think it's important, and again, like I was saying earlier, I think it's important to have those teams that you think you can get a draw with when the chips are down. But I think a good player who is a specialist with a team that's maybe got a slightly favourable tier is going to be more important than going absolutely nuts on obsessing over what are the absolute top 8 picks.
So
if you're a goblin specialist, though, you're not going to be on a World Cup winning team.
Yeah, I mean there are levels, all right. But,
no, absolutely.
Hey,
it's a fair point. It's a fair point
Yeah.
in terms of choosing your World Cup winning team. If someone is dead set on playing goblins and only ever plays goblins, then they're not going to be on a World Cup winning team.
It's still rule set dependent. At the UKTC, goblins can do absolutely fine. I regret not taking them to the last UKTC. I was talked out of it by my team, and I thought they probably coached better than the high elves I ended up taking.
But this is where the team comes in again. All President's Men is a great example of this, and they've been playing with each other for long enough to be able to have these conversations. If you have one person on your team that is stubbornly going to pick the thing that they want, even if it's to the detriment of the rest of the team,
they shouldn't be on the team.
They shouldn't be on the team, right? Because you've got to be there to support your team first and foremost. So yeah, if it's not a good pick for goblins, which I imagine is every single tournament ever, and your team is serious about doing well, sorry, PurpleChest, you don't make the cut.
So next year, having gone winner in 8 back-to-back tournaments, little Dimmy G wants to qualify for Team England, comes along and goes, excuse me, Joemanji, I want to play for Team England. Can I bring along my Imperial nobility, because I'm really good with them? Are you gonna look him in the face and break his little heart?
Would Joe break someone's heart? Is that a serious question?
I'd love to. God, that would be delightful.
Right.
But more seriously, no. I mean, PurpleChest loves nobility. He wanted to get them in last time in Malta, so yeah, that's not going to be a problem.
Okay. What about the tackle zone? The hot house. Was it Fox Piercer, where all the definitely not homoerotic gay wrestling thing happened? You're planning to hot house a new young generation of players. Are they going to be allowed to take Imperial Nobility and Goblins and Black Orcs?
I think it would depend on the tournament. I think if people want to learn by losing, for example, then yeah, why not? There's plenty of opportunities that you need to try these teams out. But I think you're doing Imperial Nobility a bit of a disservice, because I think that as well, when you go in with some of these teams like them or Slan and even Tomb Kings, they've got a bit of a niche about them. Again, if the rule set is right and the player's experienced, those are teams that other people are not going to face that often. They may not know how to play it in quite the same way, and they're going to come unstuck. I think they are more fringe picks, but I don't think they're intrinsically a bad choice. Now, if you want to win a World Cup or if you want to get into Team England, I think that's 2 different conversations around what you decide to specialize in.
Okay.
Because, if you want to get into something as established as Team England, where you've got lots of good players who've played certain teams for a long time, maybe you do want to go for something.
Some of them
is
30 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Maybe you do want to go for something that's a bit more fringe, because that way, if the rule set and the meta swings in that direction, you'll have the experience to back it. I don't think Team England's had super experienced player that, say, has had Skaven as their first choice for a long time. So if someone's coming along and has played a lot of Skaven, now when Skaven's kind of shifted from that sort of maybe top of tier 2, bottom of tier 1 type style, depending on how you split the tiers out, they've got far more of a shot because they're not going up against an established coach for Team England that's been playing Skaven for 20 years.
Yes, I think that's. I see what you're talking about. Is there no space to say, actually, just the confidence and the belief of the player is more important? The meta really does need to come first. Okay. Now, another thing that interested me.
For rule 1 is number 1 for a reason, right? First you have to begin.
Yeah. Talking about Joe, talking about playing less tournaments but playing better tournaments. And something you mentioned to me as well, I'm going to have to say it once, and I'm going to do it now. They're not on an Alfred. Wolfie! There's a reference, people only older than me, depressingly, from Citizen Smith, a TV show starring Robert Lindsay in the 70s. But Wolfie, yeah, that's going to go well, isn't it? That's the content the kids want out there now. Obscure sitcom references from the late 70s. That's going to take me to the top of the YouTube algorithm, that will. Wolfie, you talked to me about meeting up and doing, and at this point I was already asleep, and practicing openings, the opening 2 turns. Instead of going, and this is what I mean about I'll be playing too much, instead of going to some pointless tournament in Bromley, I was going to not say anywhere specific. Fuck.
And then you did.
I know, I'm going to Bromley again in December, and I won the last tournament there. Instead of going to some non-specific tournament in X, where maybe the player base isn't quite as solid, should we only prioritise going to tournaments in Y, where they've got a really solid player base, or indeed not going to tournaments at all, but meeting up with a few friends discreetly in a garden somewhere, barbecuing some chicken legs and just practicing the opening 2 turns against Khorne?
That could certainly help.
Just stopping once it's pointless. Like sorry, Dan. I went to a small tournament, but I was drawn round 1 against Nazgob, who's a reasonably good coach, and the vicious ref happened, and his block, dodge, tackle, I think it was Dark Elf, got sent off at the beginning. And that was pointless. It was a sort of waste of the next 90 minutes because he didn't have any good players left and didn't have any skills because they were all on 1 player. And if it wasn't a tournament, then we'd have just reset and started again and said, well, there's no point in doing this, is there? And I do that sometimes with Alex. We'll start a game, and if something stupid happens that means the game is over, then we won't just plow on with the next 9 turns. We'll stop and restart.
How over is over? Because
that's the other thing.
Sometimes you need to be able to get a draw from 3 players down in turn 1, don't you, Joe? That's vital. So Dan, explain to me why I should want to meet up in your garden and practice openings against Khemri.
Well, I mean, I have a very lovely garden. So
okay.
You just enjoy the atmosphere.
Would I just love being out of London in the air?
The point is to identify the phases of the game where you're most likely to win or lose. And in particular, the point of practicing is to turn a situation that you're not experienced at into one that you are experienced at, so that you make fewer mistakes in those situations. So you think about the really key parts of game, okay? So especially when you're playing a new team, you set up in a certain situation, the other person's set up and you're like, okay, oh my God, how do I set up in this situation? You should never be in a position where, if you're taking the game seriously, where you shouldn't know how to set up in a number of different situations. The same thing with stopping 2 turners, right? It's hard to stop a 1 turner. There's obviously set formations that you can learn, but do you have the confidence to score in turn 6 or 7, knowing that you can shut someone out in 2 or 3 turns and set up correctly to do that? So it's about taking phases of the game that you think you can control, that are fully within your control, and practicing them over and over again, because the further you get into a game, the more the returns start to diminish. Now, there are points as well that, like, maybe you practice you're in a fairly bad position in turn 7 and you still need to score. That's a little bit harder to simulate because you kind of need to create those situations.
Anyone can throw an elf wall up and say, get through this.
Yeah, but you should be able to practice, because it will start to allow you to connect some of those dots. What are you really trying to do in turn 6, and how can you set up better at the beginning to get where you need to be in turn 6? Yeah. So it's about trying to eliminate those mistakes by practicing situations that you can control.
Well, the difference is that openings in turn 1, particularly on offense, is more strategic, and when you get to turn 6, it's more tactical.
Yeah.
Like stringing together the correct sequence of dice rolls is a purely tactical skill, and lots of people get to that skill quite early. And the difficult part of Blood Bowl is the strategic part of like when you're setting up an offense, does this zombie go 3 squares from the sideline or 4? That kind of stuff. Like you can win or lose a game on that, and people don't spend as much time thinking about that, I think, as they do like one-turners and things like that. And that's where you can just get better, and it's a thing that I think people don't spend as much time practicing as probably they should, or talking about. Perhaps.
Oh, well, I've always said, so am I wrong, that we over-focus on openings because we feel we can control it. And what matters is not having a terrible setup. As long as your setup isn't terrible, then what really matters is what happens dice to dice, decision to decision. So as long as you've got a solid setup that isn't terrible, that will pretty much do you in 90% of games. Is that fair?
What is a solid setup? You know, you play against someone that might be playing undead, and they'll put their mummies 7 squares apart.
No,
Well,
that's
quite
not
easy to isolate them at that point, isn't it?
Yeah.
So maybe by practicing openings, you'll start to realize, okay, I'm going to try putting them here this time. Well, how does that work? Well, that doesn't feel as good. And so you're making all of these almost random choices, and then you're finding the ones that work better, and then you're sticking with those, and then that will lead to you being in more common positions, sort of 4 or 5 turns in, than you were before. So yeah, maybe you don't want to like super optimize in every circumstance, but you know, if you're having to do a go for it, when you didn't need to because at the opening you put that zombie 4 squares away instead of 3 or whatever, that you know, these are the fine margins that the top tables are being won or lost on.
They're just not making those sorts of mistakes.
They just don't make those mistakes. Yeah, they just don't give you those opportunities. You have to really work for them.
Now
This is
to
interesting.
bring
This
it
is
into the mainstream, we had on Blood Bowl 2, just in its final phases, there were a couple of things that sort of became en vogue, and one of them was the offset defense. And one of the things when I was sort of coaching people or talking to them about it, or even commentating on a game with it in, was I could really tell the difference between someone that knows exactly what they are doing with the offset defense, what they are, experiencing and exposing, what odds there are, what they're trying to exploit and what they're not trying to exploit. There are things that you are losing by doing it as well as things you are gaining. And they would understand sort of both sides of that equation. And then I saw people that were doing it because it was done to them and they couldn't work out what to do about it. And I wonder, is there even a value just there in something that you think will confuse the opponent? Is that... And should we all know that if something new happens in Blood Bowl, we need to find out about it, practice against it, and understand what to do about it? Is that what we're saying? So, 2 sides to that. Is there value in just surprising people with something they're not expecting? And should we find out about everything happening in Blood Bowl and practice how to beat it?
If our goal is to win a World Cup, then I don't think surprise tactics have any value because they are not going to work on the best coaches that you face. Surprise tactics are a really good way of tricking inexperienced coaches and beating them when you probably would have beaten them anyway. So there's not a huge amount of value in it, personally, from my point of view.
Okay. Interesting. That's what I've always said about Clawpom. It was a way of finishing off teams you would have beaten anyway, rather than actually winning games. Dan, what do you think? Should we be practicing these new fads, and the minute we hear about something new in Blood Bowl, should we be sitting down and spending a couple of hours working it out?
I don't think you should be spending a lot of time on them. I think there's a little bit of value to maybe playing through it once or twice to make sure that you're not caught out yourself and you do something silly. Mainly as a way of navigating maybe a tricky midfield. But yeah, once you get to the top end, I don't think there's too much cause for practicing trick plays. I think it's practicing practicing the main plays, the core plays over and over to just get better at that.
I see. Now, I do want to go... We've got a couple more graphs from Mike. I just want to see what we can pull out of these as well. So let me pull up, first of all... Let's move over to this. This one I quite liked, but we need to come further out on that one. Bear with me. This is the percentage of win rates they were getting prior to the World Cup and the percentage of win rates they actually got in the World Cup. And some really interesting statistics leapt out. I just wonder what we're learning from how people actually coached at the World Cup, Mike, and what learnings we can take away from this. Underworld, for example, and Dark Elves, they did lose a couple of points in terms of their win percentages, but largely stayed up there at the top of the pile. Amazons
Yep.
went notably up, as did a few of the other sort of standard races, your Slan, your Lizardmen. But two big fallers, notably Wood Elves, went from the very highest win rate to very much sort of 10th,
Yep.
back end of the top pack. What do you think was going on there?
Well, my initial theory was that less good coaches took them to the World Cup. So good coaches might have tried them out in advance, but then not at the World Cup. But then what we saw actually in the other stat was that it was actually reasonably high NAF ranking coaches that took them to the World Cup.
Yeah, so then
and
this, I've
also,
just pulled over to that one. This is the who took what at what ranking.
yeah,
So the higher the race here, then the higher the NAF ranking of the coach that took them. So the very best NAF ranked coaches were taking Underworld, the next
yep.
Wood Elves, then Vampires, then Old World Alliance, then Dark Elves, then Skaven. The people with the lowest average NAF ranking were choosing Ogres, Humans, Nurgle, Chaos Chosen, Goblins, Elven Union, and Black Orcs, propping up the bottom there.
Yeah, so I don't know. So I'm open to other theories about why Wood Elves and High Elves dropped so much. High Elves partly because only 30 people took them, so you get obviously
Right.
the fewer coaches there are, the
Very
more
high variance on
variability
that
is.
then, yeah.
Yeah. So that explains the High Elf thing, I think. Whereas Wood Elves, I don't know.
Because over on this side, on the left side of this piece of paper, we had 16,000 games, didn't we?
Yeah.
Played in the World Cup rule set in the year preceding the World Cup. And then over here we had, 1,200 games around for 9 games. We had about another...
10,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
About another,
10,000 games on the right and 16,000 on the left.
yeah. So some chunky numbers both sides. And yet some of these big changes. I thought that was really interesting. Does that mean that stats be damned? It doesn't matter what stats tell you. There is nothing to be learned from statistics.
I think you can learn some things. You can't necessarily draw hard and fast conclusions. It's a conversation point, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I
there's
do
so
want to go
many
back to
things
pointing
to
out
go
you predicted
into
6
it.
of the top 10 finishers based on their highest NAF rankings, which we pretended in the pre-World Cup were in some ways seedings. They weren't. They were just numbers that you came out with. And they proved incredibly prescient. Dan, the races. Does it matter what people are telling you beforehand, or is there... I mean, what I took from that is that it matters what seems to be doing well, but it matters slightly more what you can do well within that.
I mean, it's both. I mean, it's both the the artisan and the tools that they're using. If you're down on resource, you're fighting an upward battle. So of course that's going to be harder. But a mastermind can get something out of it that other people can't. So I mean, I echo Mike's sentiments. Drawing hard and fast conclusions when there are so many potential underlying situations. This could be pure volatility. Maybe High Elves more than Wood Elves. It could be the loss of something like Sneaky Git. It could be that the better players are facing the other better players because they're very good, or it could be that they're not as good and that's why they're taking them. It could be any of those things. And I think just trying to look at top level stats and drawing formal conclusions from it is quite difficult. But an important lesson where you shouldn't necessarily just look at how things have been doing going into a rule set before deciding what you're going to take. The meta can shift quite quickly.
And then there was just one more thing I wanted to flash up. I thought this was quite fitting as well. This is I think my plan for how I plan to win the next World Cup, which is quite simply that je m'appelle PurpleChest, je suis français. I am going to declare French. I'm going to betray my home nation and see if one of the French teams will have me on. Because whilst I did think there was an enormous amount of quality in depth across everyone at the World Cup, I mean, lots of European nations had some fantastic teams up there. What is going on with French Blood Bowl right now? Because they seem to be absolutely storming it. With a lot of good Spanish teams there too, don't get me wrong, but team after team that I saw really up at the top end were all celebrating other people's failures. They were all French. Are we miles behind the French? Is it specifically the French? Should je suis PurpleChest be my new watchword?
I think it's the case that a rising tide raises all ships, isn't it? That's what's happening in France. Is that the more better players there are, the more games you get against better players, which improves you, which means more better players exist for more people to play against, etc., etc. So they've just got a huge, close-knit community, as the French tend to have as part of their national culture. And they do things like do tests where they run a huge team event, and that's all volunteer work. Like everything, there's like a team of 18 people running that event, for example. Like they get a specialist in to do each little bit from their day job, and that's something that seems to be happening less in England than it used to, rather than more, where the increased number of tournaments means people are not traveling anymore. And everyone is just sitting in their very small local bunker and just playing the people in their local scene.
Yeah, I'm going back to Bromley.
And if you look at where the traditional, if you look at Team England and where those players have come from, they've all come from 3 leagues, effectively. They've come from the Water Bowl League in Manchester, the Geordie Bowl League in Newcastle, and the ECBBL in London. And that's because those leagues had 3 or 4 very good coaches who dragged everybody else up with them, and then that created a hothouse effect where those people continue to be good and continue to get better.
So you're saying that if you're playing in Bromley, you will never make Team England? Is that what I'm hearing?
That may be what you hear, but that's not what I said. Okay. But yeah, it helps. That's what it is. Like the best way to get better is to play against good coaches.
So is this what I'm back to saying, that perhaps we're playing too much Blood Bowl and not the right Blood Bowl? Not enough practicing, as Dan wants to do, sitting in his garden endlessly practicing, setups and one turns and things, and also playing the wrong Blood Bowl. We're turning up to tournaments we think we might win, or it's only 20 minutes away. Why wouldn't I go to that rather than no, that's an hour away and I'm going to get my ass kicked?
We all know people who prioritise going to easier events because they hope they might win, rather than going to events where they might learn something or improve.
No idea what you're talking about.
And that's fine. If you want to do that, that's great. Like everyone could just enjoy the game in the way they want to, but if you want to win the World Cup in 2027, then you should be looking to...
I'm not sure I do, but lots of people will, and that's why I think this will be good content. No, I want to. That's why we're having this chat. Now, we do have to let everyone go at some point. We've reached that 2-hour mark, which I don't know how we keep doing this. I keep promising we won't, and we have. So I'm going to do this thing. It was suggested to me by someone much better at this than I am, and I've just stolen it completely. But what I should do at the end, because I talk so bloody much, is turn to everyone that's on the show and say, what have I talked over that you should have had a chance to say? Or what have I missed that you've not managed to bring to my attention because of my ability and verbal diarrhea? So I'm going to do that. I'll give you a little bit of warning. We will come to Wolfie Dan. Wolfie! Last, of course, because he's new on the show, so we'll give him the most thinking time. We'll start with Mike, because he's been on the most recently. Mike, what have we not talked about, not said? What, in terms of winning the World Cup, have we not covered that we should?
So I got 2 things, actually.
Okay.
One I did mention, but it didn't get talked about, was how important is it to be mates with your teammates?
Yeah. Could there be someone on the team you think's an utter twat? Is that okay?
And then the second is, we've talked a lot about playing more good Blood Bowl, but what can you do in between those games of Blood Bowl? What should you be doing? Should you be watching the top streamers? Should you be theory bowling? What would help if you can't make it to lots of tournaments for financial or whatever reasons? Is there anything else you can do to help in between times? Online play is obviously good, but
the man of many names: Dionysian, Spence, Maximum, Derek, Big Daddy, Love You. I think that's only on one particular site he goes on. Has always said that actually he feels a Huel-fueled diet and physical exercise are important to top Blood Bowl play. Are we too fat and unfit? Should we be better physical specimens for better Blood Bowl? I mean, look at the Adonis of a man that is Gigster. Is that part of his secret?
And how many chairs were broken at the World Cup? Was it 50?
I might have broken mine. I turned around really quickly, and it was a really weak... Someone had weakened that chair.
Definitely drink more water at a tournament. That's the top tip.
Is it? Yeah. Try not to make friends with the Irish, particularly at about 10 a.m. That would be a top tip from me. Lovely as the Irish are, you're unlikely to be sober by lunchtime, let alone mid-afternoon. Joe, what things have we not mentioned in terms of winning the World Cup? What tiny little bite of advice is going to put those people over the edge and make them winners in 27?
I think the only thing I wanted to mention was the recent Team England newsletter that came out. And I think if you find Team England Blood Bowl on either Facebook or Twitter, that's probably the easiest way of signing up for that. And then that will get you news regarding team events and travelling to foreign events and everything surrounding playing competitive Blood Bowl focused towards Team England and the World Cup. And then by engaging with that community, hopefully you'll be able to, learn more stuff and be in the loop for when things happen.
Fantastic. And I've said I'd come to you last, and I'm going to be a man of my word. Wulfyn, Wolfie Dan, Wolfie. What is it that people need to?
In honor of the World Cup, I'm actually going to announce that for charity, I will be soon auctioning signed Andy Davo Alicante World Cup hat. So anyone wants themselves on some authentic Andy Davo merch.
Wow.
I will be announcing that in some other places. But I'm sure, Sam, you will agree that the only way you can really judge how well this did is we need some sort of scientific baseline, right? So I will also be, for charity, auctioning an authentic San hat from the World Cup, which I stole from him.
Did you actually steal it
without him realizing?
Beautiful.
So yeah, if you want some authentic San merch or some authentic Andy Davo merch,
Yeah,
I'm showing the hats up for those guys on the
incredible. Do you want Team England legend? As we've heard, World Cup and Euro Bowl winner, serial top of the tree Sam merchandise, or do you want cheap Twitch floozy Andy Davo, rent a crowd,
got an Andy Davo signature,
Welsh,
so
just because
Sam
that's the team he can get on. If you want a Welsh Andy Davo hat, well, no such thing exists, but the English Andy Davo has signed that one. Thank you very much, Dan. That's a lovely. I look forward to hearing about that in your very active Discord server. Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you here. That is how you win the World Cup in 27. You do all the things we've talked about and none of the things we dismissed. And if you do that, I am prepared to personally guarantee you'll go to the World Cup and at least have some fun trying to win it. And then it'll be won by someone French shouting as you roll ones and laughing in your face. I had a great time at the World Cup. So did these three people, and they were up at the top business end of it for quite a lot of it. So I wanted to talk to some people better at Blood Bowl of me and see if I can be better next time out. I did really enjoy it. But I'm going to leave you with a quote that was given to us that said, that's the one I haven't written down. So I'm going to be paraphrasing. What a shame. Someone's favourite football teacher when they were young used to say to them, everyone's here to play for fun. But the people having the most fun tend to be the ones winning. So that's what I plan to do in 27. I plan to come back with the World Cup. Not as part of Team England, because of course it's not a national competition. So that will have to be a Euro Bowl, and that will have to be Dimmy G as he's planning to take over Team England. That was One World, One Blood Bowl number 40. If I could ask everyone to wave, it helps me find it in the edit. We'll say goodbye to everyone that is watching, and goodbye to everyone that's listening. Okay, so the stream isn't over, but that's the recorded bit over.